Hello there. Why is it that our establishment is more than happy to allow violent people to sneak into the country via the English Channel? Neither the French nor the UK governments want you to see this, because it would ruin their cosy little arrangement of ferrying newcomers across the Channel and into the UK. But if the UK public got the hint that some of these people had used violence to get into our country, and in some cases extreme violence, there would be calls for a much more robust approach to the dinghy problem. GB News has reported that violence has broken out between the French police, the people smugglers and the potential dinghy occupants. The people traffickers are trying to protect their illicit trade by preventing those that haven't paid for a place on the boats from getting a ride, while those who can't afford a place in a dinghy are using violent means to try and force their way in. Then there's those who have paid for their seat. They would presumably not just give that space up to a non-payer or someone who jeopardised their crossing, would they? And the French police are on the outside trying to quell the mayhem. But of course, when the police show up, neither the people smugglers nor the potential dinghy occupants want them there. Mainly because the French police have orders to puncture every people smuggler boat they find. So both sides turn on the police. And given that, if the police think the violent people will soon be off their beaches and in England, they probably have an incentive to not try too hard. But once in the boat, everyone in there is suddenly an angel, to be afforded all the human rights possible plus a bit when they reach the UK shores. Well, according to our open borders establishment, they're angels. And our woke lefty lovies will claim that it's a very small minority that tend to violence, or they only do it out of desperation or because of the stress related to their self-inflicted position. So it doesn't matter, we must tolerate it, we're told. Despite the indicators that the violence does not end on the beaches. As an example, I listened to a maritime radio snippet from one of the French border patrol craft shadowing a migrant boat during its crossing. And the French sounded very keen to get the UK border force cutter there as quickly as possible, because the presence of the French border force vessel was causing agitation on the rubber dinghy. Agitation, he said. Now I wonder what he meant by that. And I also wonder how many other dinghies have been full of agitated passengers whenever a French border vessel showed up in their area. Well, what worries me is what happens when some of these people get to the UK and don't get the gold-plated service they were expecting. Well, we've seen hints of that, haven't we? Far from being grateful, it seems to be far more of an air of entitlement. Now, GB News picked up on one very recent incident in Oye-Plage on the French coast, some 20 kilometres west of Dunkirk. A spot that seems to have attracted a lot of people smugglers and dinghy operations, where half a dozen or more people were injured during an altercation involving knives. And I, for one, do wonder how frequent these potentially deadly little spats actually are. And according to Patrick Christie's on GB News, these altercations are escalating. And Nigel Farage, who Christie's was talking to, said, "The traffickers now carry guns. The French police now carry guns. We are very close to a major escalation in this crisis. And it's getting worse very, very quickly," Farage said. All because of the vast sums of money involved in this whole people trafficking process. Now, Christie's was also joined on the programme by Philip Amery, a Dunkirk councillor, who said that there were now too few dinghies available to ferry the growing number of people who wanted to cross the channel, something that will inevitably cause friction. He also wants to see the UK turn the boats back to France so as to eliminate the pull factor, something that would remove the people smugglers and their boats from his beaches. If you haven't seen it, you really must watch this. Even the French are saying we need to turn the boats back.
I'm very pleased to say I am joined now by a man very much at the heart of this story. The regional councillor for the Rassemblement National and municipal councillor for Dunkirk. It is Philippe Emery. Philippe, thank you very much for joining us. How bad is the situation in Dunkirk?
I think the situation in Dunkirk is more bad than I believe, because I have to say thank you, GB News is with you. I can see those pictures. We cannot see those pictures in French. There is a kind of omerta. There is a kind of lie of the government, of the French government. And when I have been contacted by you in the afternoon, I have looked on the French newspaper and I see that there is one man who has been killed, that there are 4 migrants which have been stabbed. But I have not read that the police officer have been forced to jump back in their beach buggies and retreat, as I just have seen on your video.
Mm. And what kind of people are we now bringing to Britain across the Channel? What kind of people do you think?
I think what we have seen is a kind of a struggle between the migrant and the people smugglers, because there are not enough small boats, and more people want to go on the small boats, but and they are fighting together to find the place, and maybe some migrants, they have no money to give to the people smuggler. It's very sad, because I want to tell you, each time a human being is killed, stabbed, in such circumstances, it's a sad and bad news. So the question is how to avoid this situation. And myself, I am among those who we are thinking that we have to consider the way followed by the Australian authorities since 10 years. No way is the watchword for all the migrants and people smugglers. Without this kind of message and action, the migrants and people smugglers are believing that once they have succeeded to enter in one country, they won't be sent back.
So, final question, Philippe. You live in Dunkirk, and
Yes.
you would be in favour of the Brits towing the boats back as a deterrent, yes?
I have not well understood what you
Would
said.
you be in favour of us turning the boats back, like Australia?
Yes, for sure. I think that the way the Australian government since 10 years has done, it's a kind of success. They have resolved, and the number of migrants has been drastically reduced. So I think we have to find the same kind of policy. And when, by example, an agreement is found between Italian government and Tunisian government, and now we have heard about a kind of agreement with Union European and Egypt, we have to do all with what has been to be done, so that
do everything that needs to be done.
Will stay in Africa.
Philippe, thank you very, very much. Much appreciated. Thank you for joining us, and I hope to talk to you again very soon, my good man. That is Philippe Emery there, who is a councillor in Dunkirk. Well, look, you heard it there.
Please do leave a comment below if you've seen this on the BBC. Or is it only on GB News? So the French councillor, who is right there at the coal face, and he says it's worse than even he thought. And that he's only seeing this because GB News is showing it. And this situation does concern him. He lives there. So I have to ask, what would the response have been had it been determined that the far right were somehow involved? Would the BBC have reported it then? Well, we all know the answer to that. All I see is two globalist government establishments working hand in glove to achieve their WEF-inspired goals, while totally ignoring the ordinary people, and worse, working against the interests of those ordinary people. And they're also putting the safety of the ordinary people at risk. Now, the European Parliament is voting today on a series of laws that make up their new migration pact. And this allows for the detention of migrants for up to 6 months, including minors who are assessed to be a security risk. Now, this will replace the Dublin Accord and make it a requirement for asylum seekers to seek refuge in the first EU country they get to. And this includes rules that make it harder for them to get to the French coast. And that would be a win for the UK. But the rules also include requirements for each member state to take a certain amount of refugees every year or pay a fee into the EU coffers for every single one they don't take. And that's the bit that Keir Starmer would gleefully sign the UK up to. It will be interesting to see how much pushback there is against this when the voting starts later today. But whatever happens, it will take quite some time to get these laws properly in place. And in the meantime, violent people will still be allowed to enter the UK.